I never thought my own daughter-in-law would lock me out of my grandson's life. She kept him from me, erased my name from his childhood, and even hid the scholarship I worked so hard to build for his future. For years I was made to feel like I didn't matter, like my love had been buried under her lies. But what she didn't know was that truth has a way of breaking through. And when my grandson stepped on stage with a microphone in his hand, her secrets came crashing down for everyone to hear. Get ready, because this story is not just about betrayal. It's about a reckoning, a revelation, and a grandmother's love that could not be silenced. Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 68 years old, and I've lived my whole life in Richmond, Virginia. This city has seen me through my happiest days and my darkest nights. I raised my children here, buried my husband here, and I thought I'd live out my golden years surrounded by family. That was always my dream, to be the grandmother who bakes cookies on Sunday afternoons, who sits on the porch swing with her grandson after school, and who never misses a birthday or graduation. But dreams don't always survive people's choices. And mine was shattered by someone who married into this family, my daughter-in-law, Denise. She came into our lives with a polished smile and smooth words, but beneath it all she carried a sharpness I didn't notice at first. Denise was my son Daniel's wife and the mother of my grandson Ethan. To the world she might have looked like a respectable woman, hard-working, well-dressed, and always in control. But behind closed doors she was colder than ice, especially toward me. For years I tried to be kind. I gave her respect, I offered her help, I even watched her son, my grandson, whenever she needed to work late or take a break. I loved Ethan like my own. He was only 5 when Daniel passed away, and I thought my role as grandmother would matter even more after that. I thought Denise and I would lean on each other, that we'd hold the family together for Ethan's sake. I was wrong. Instead of pulling closer, she began to push me further and further away. It started small. Missed phone calls, excuses about why Ethan couldn't visit, tight smiles that never reached her eyes. I told myself it was grief, that she just needed time. But grief doesn't harden a woman's heart like that. Control does. The truth is, Denise didn't want me in Ethan's life. She saw me as competition for his love, as if there wasn't enough room in that little boy's heart for both of us. And over the years she made sure to remind me of my place, on the outside looking in. I'll never forget the day I realized she had shut the door completely. Ethan was 10 and I hadn't been invited to his birthday party. I only found out it had happened because a neighbor mentioned the balloons and cars parked outside her house. I stood at my window, staring out at the quiet street, knowing that while they were celebrating just a few miles away, I wasn't even considered part of my own grandson's life. That moment cut me deeper than anything else I'd ever faced. Deeper than widowhood, deeper than poverty, deeper than any hardship I had endured. To be shut out of my grandson's life by the very woman who promised my son she would cherish family, that was betrayal in its purest form. And yet I stayed quiet. I didn't fight, I didn't beg, I didn't barge into her house demanding my place. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe it was fate. Because what Denise didn't know was that love has a way of leaving footprints, even when someone tries to sweep them away. And one day those footprints would lead Ethan right back to me. Before everything soured, my life had been full of warmth. I wasn't a wealthy woman, not by a long shot, but I was rich in the ways that mattered. Family dinners, porch talks, and a garden that always seemed to bloom right when I needed it to. My son Daniel was the kind of man any mother would be proud of. He was steady, hardworking, and kind. When he married Denise, I welcomed her with open arms, even though something about her smile never reached her eyes. Still, I tried to believe that with time we'd become family. In those early years I helped them any way I could. When Daniel's hours ran long at the fire department, I would pick up little Ethan from daycare. I'd rock him to sleep on my lap, humming lullabies my own mother once sang to me. The boy had a laugh that could light up a whole room, and when his tiny fingers clutched mine, I felt I had found my second chance at joy after losing my husband. Denise, Well, she tolerated me in those days. She would drop Ethan off with quick instructions. Don't give him too much sugar, or he needs to nap at exactly 1 o'clock. Always spoken like I was a hired hand, not his grandmother. But I brushed it off. I told myself she was just nervous, a young mother trying to do things right. I bit my tongue and focused on Ethan. I made sure his childhood had little sparks of magic. We'd bake cookies in my small kitchen, flour dusting the air as he giggled at his messy hands. I taught him how to water the tomatoes in my backyard, his tiny plastic watering can spilling more onto his shoes than the plants. On Sundays I'd read him Bible stories and fairy tales before bed, and he'd beg me for just one more. Those were the moments that kept me going. But every so often I would catch Denise watching us with an expression I couldn't quite name. Not anger exactly, but something close. A kind of tightness around her mouth, a stiffening in her shoulders. Like she didn't like how close we were. I ignored it at first, brushing it off as jealousy or tiredness. But as the months turned into years, I began to notice little things. She stopped asking me to babysit unless she had no other choice. If I dropped by with a casserole or a bag of groceries, she'd take it with a thin smile, then set it aside as though she didn't trust the food. And when Ethan would run to me with open arms, shouting, "Grandma," with joy, I saw her jaw tighten just slightly before she forced a smile. It was as though she wanted to control how much space I occupied in his little world. And slowly she began to tighten the reins. The visits became fewer. The phone calls shorter. By the time Ethan was 7, I could already feel the walls closing in. So I never complained. I told myself, don't cause trouble, Margaret. Don't give her a reason to push you further away. I held my tongue and stayed patient because my love for Ethan was worth swallowing my pride. What I didn't know then was that pride wasn't the only thing I'd have to swallow. That woman wasn't just pulling me out of Ethan's daily life. She was planting seeds to erase me completely. The true break came not long after Daniel passed away. Losing him was like having the air ripped out of my chest. My only son, gone in the blink of an eye, taken by a heart attack that no one saw coming. He was just 39. I thought grief might draw us together, Denise and me, because we both loved him and because Ethan needed both of us more than ever. But grief can bring out the best in some and the worst in others. And in Denise it brought out the worst. At the funeral, I remember reaching for Ethan's hand as we stood by the graveside. He was only 5, barely tall enough to see over the casket. His little fingers gripped mine so tightly, I thought my heart would break all over again. But Denise pried his hand away, pulling him against her skirt as though my touch were poison. "I'll take care of him," she told me later, her voice clipped and cool. "He doesn't need confusion right now. He needs stability. Too many people will only overwhelm him." I was stunned. Confusion? I was his grandmother. I was the one who had rocked him to sleep, who had cared for him when she was too tired or too busy. I swallowed my anger, telling myself she was grieving, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But a few weeks later the hammer came down. I called her house one afternoon to ask if Ethan could come spend the weekend with me, something we had done countless times before. She answered in that icy tone of hers. "That won't be possible anymore, Margaret," she said flatly. "Ethan needs routine. He can't be bouncing between houses. It's not good for him." "Not good for him?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Denise, I've been in his life since the day he was born. You know he loves being here." Her answer cut like a blade. "Frankly, I don't think it's healthy for him to be so attached to you. He needs to learn to stand on his own feet. I can manage his upbringing just fine." I sat there in silence, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to believe what I was hearing. She didn't just want to limit my time, she wanted to erase me altogether. From that day forward, she made good on her words. The visits stopped. My calls went unanswered. Birthdays came and went without an invitation. At first, I thought maybe Ethan was too young to notice. But when I finally saw him at a distant cousin's gathering, he looked at me with uncertainty, as though he wasn't sure if he was allowed to hug me. My heart nearly broke in half. It was the moment I realized I had been locked out. Not by fate, not by accident, but by deliberate choice. Denise had shut the door on me and turned the key. And as much as I wanted to storm that door down, I knew if I did, I risked losing Ethan completely. So I stood there on the outside, powerless, with my love bottled up inside me, waiting for a chance to break through. But what I didn't know then was that my chance would come in the most unexpected way, through something Denise thought she had buried forever. The years after Daniel's death were the loneliest of my life. Richmond felt colder somehow, like the city itself had turned its back on me. I'd walk through the local farmer's market, see little boys tugging at their grandmother's sleeves, and feel a sharp ache in my chest. That should have been me with Ethan. That was supposed to be my joy in these twilight years. Birthdays, school plays, little league games. I wasn't there. Instead, I heard about them in passing through neighbors or church friends. I kept a box on my dresser filled with gifts I had bought for him. Books, puzzles, small keepsakes. Each one wrapped and waiting, collecting dust year after year like unopened pieces of my love. I hit rock bottom the night of his 12th birthday. I sat alone in my kitchen, the cake I baked untouched, its frosting starting to harden under the light. I had decorated it with blue sprinkles, his favorite color when he was little, even though I hadn't seen him in years. I lit a single candle, whispered a prayer for him, and cried until the wax melted into nothing. That was the moment I realized just how much of his life I had been robbed of. But life has a way of revealing what's hidden, even in the darkest places. One afternoon I was cleaning out old boxes in the attic, boxes that had belonged to Daniel. I had avoided them for years, too painful to face. But something pulled me there that day. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was fate. Among his old uniforms and photographs, I found a thick folder, carefully labeled in Daniel's handwriting, Ethan's future. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank documents, legal papers, and a letter addressed to me. Daniel had set up a scholarship fund in Ethan's name, and I had quietly contributed to it over the years when I could, tucking away small amounts from my modest savings. It wasn't much at first, but Daniel had built it steadily before his passing. In his letter, he thanked me for helping him start it and reminded me that this money was to be Ethan's foundation no matter what happened to him. My breath caught. Denise had never told Ethan about this. Not once. All the records were here in this dusty box, untouched, waiting. I realized, with a hollow weight in my chest, that she had kept it hidden. She wanted Ethan to believe she was the only one supporting him, the only one investing in his future. That discovery lit something inside me. A small flame in the darkness. She could shut me out of his daily life, erase me from his birthdays and holidays, but she couldn't erase this. My fingerprints were all over that scholarship, as was Daniel's. For the first time in years, I felt a kind of strength return to me. Quiet, steady, patient. I didn't march to Denise's door demanding answers. I didn't shout it from the rooftops. I tucked the folder back into my arms and whispered to myself, one day Ethan will know. One day he'll see the truth. And from that moment forward, I held on to that secret like a lifeline, waiting for the day it would come to light. After finding Daniel's folder, I sat at my kitchen table for hours, papers spread across the wood like puzzle pieces. My tears had dried by then, replaced by a quiet determination. For so long, Denise had made me feel powerless, as though I had no place in Ethan's life. But these documents reminded me, I wasn't powerless. I had been building something for Ethan all along, even if he didn't know it yet. The scholarship wasn't grand by the standards of the rich, but for a young man like Ethan, it could open doors, college tuition, books, maybe even a chance to chase the dreams his father never got the time to. And every deposit slip, every note in Daniel's handwriting, was proof that this wasn't just money. It was love. A love Denise could never erase. I thought about confronting her right then and there, but something deep inside whispered, wait. If I showed my hand too early, she'd twist it. She'd find some way to claim it was her doing, or worse, she'd hide it deeper so Ethan would never see it. So I chose patience. Every month I would quietly add what I could. A small portion of my social security check, a little extra from selling homemade jam at the market or hemming clothes for neighbors. Pennies to some, but gold to me, because each dollar was a piece of my love folded into Ethan's future. It became my secret act of rebellion against Denise's cruelty. While she tried to write me out of the story, I was writing myself back in line by line, deposit by deposit. The years rolled on. I watched from a distance as Ethan grew taller, his shoulders squaring, his voice deepening. I heard whispers through friends he was doing well in school, bright as ever, good at math and debate. He was on the honor roll. My heart ached with pride and sorrow at the same time. And though I wasn't at his games or his ceremonies, I kept telling myself, one day he will know who stood behind him. One day the truth will speak louder than her lies. That thought carried me through the loneliest nights. It was like carrying a flame cupped in my palms, fragile but alive. Denise, of course, had no idea. To her, I was just the old woman she had successfully cast aside, invisible and defeated. She didn't know that in the quiet corners of my home, I was preparing something she couldn't stop. Because money is one thing, but when it carries the weight of truth, it becomes a weapon stronger than any grudge. And I promised myself when the moment came I would let Ethan wield it. By the time Ethan was finishing high school, whispers started circling back to me. Whispers about Denise's troubles. Richmond isn't a big place. News trickles down like rainwater through cracks. A neighbor who worked at the bank mentioned Denise had been struggling with her mortgage. A church friend said she'd overheard Denise arguing with a loan officer in town. Money, it seemed, was slipping through her fingers. I wasn't surprised. Denise always lived like appearances were more important than stability. Designer handbags, expensive vacations, and a car that turned heads, all on a widow's salary. She had grown accustomed to playing queen, but the crown was cracking. Meanwhile, Ethan was thriving. His teachers praised his hard work, and his name often appeared in the local paper's honor roll list. I clipped every one of those mentions, slipping them into a scrapbook I kept just for him. I wasn't there to cheer from the bleachers or clap in the auditorium, but I celebrated in my own quiet way. I also heard, through that same circle of whispers, that Denise had begun applying for scholarships and financial aid for Ethan's college. She paraded herself as the selfless mother fighting to give her son the future he deserved. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that the Real foundation for Ethan's future had been waiting all along, under her very nose. I kept my silence. Oh, how I wanted to march into that guidance counselor's office and drop Daniel's folder on the desk. To expose her lies, to show Ethan the truth. But I knew the time wasn't right. If I rushed it, Denise would twist the narrative. She'd claim credit, or worse, find a way to cut me out of it completely. So I waited. Patience became my greatest weapon. I watched as the pressure mounted on her shoulders, as she put on her painted smile in public while her house of cards wobbled in private. And through it all, I kept feeding the scholarship, one quiet deposit at a time, steady as a heartbeat. By then Ethan was 17, tall and handsome, the spitting image of Daniel. Sometimes I'd see him walking down the street with friends, and for just a moment, I would allow myself to imagine what it might feel like if he stopped, if he turned and ran into my arms the way he once did as a boy. But I didn't call out. I didn't break the fragile silence. I trusted that life was guiding him toward me step by step. And then came the night that changed everything. I received a call from an old church acquaintance who had attended the senior awards ceremony at Ethan's high school. She was breathless on the line, her words tumbling over each other as she told me what had happened on that stage. Ethan had won a scholarship. My scholarship. Daniel's scholarship. And he hadn't just accepted it, he had taken the microphone in front of the entire community and thanked me by name. The very truth Denise had tried so hard to bury had risen up like sunlight breaking through clouds, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. The day of Ethan's graduation is etched in my memory like it happened yesterday, even though I wasn't invited. Denise made sure of that. She sent out announcements, but none ever reached my mailbox. Still, word travels fast in Richmond, and I knew exactly when the ceremony would take place. I thought about sneaking into the back of the auditorium just to see him walk across that stage, but I decided against it. I didn't want to cause a scene or give Denise another reason to paint me as the villain. So instead, I sat at home in my quiet living room, the TV off, the clock ticking too loud on the wall, imagining what it must look like. Ethan in his cap and gown, tall and proud, with his father's strong jaw and his mother's sharp eyes. And then the phone rang. It was Helen, an old friend from church. She had gone to the ceremony to see her granddaughter graduate. Her voice quivered with excitement, and before she even finished the first sentence, I knew something remarkable had happened. "Margaret," she said, "you should have been there. You won't believe what your grandson just did." My heart skipped a beat. She told me how the principal had called Ethan's name for a special award, a scholarship significant enough to turn heads. As Ethan walked onto the stage, the audience applauded, Denise smiling stiffly in the front row, basking in borrowed glory. But then, instead of taking his certificate quietly and stepping aside like most students, Ethan paused. He took the microphone in his hand, his tall frame straightening, his eyes scanning the crowd. And he said in a clear, steady voice, "This scholarship isn't just about me. It was set up years ago by my father and my grandmother, Margaret Holloway. She believed in me even when others tried to keep us apart. I want to thank her for never giving up on me, even when I didn't know the whole story." Helen told me the room went silent. Dead silent. You could hear the air catch in people's throats. Then a ripple of whispers spread through the crowd as every eye shifted toward Denise. Her face drained of color, frozen in a stiff smile that couldn't hold. And in that silence, my name, the name she had tried so hard to erase, hung in the air, undeniable. When Helen finished telling me, I sat in my chair, tears streaming down my face. For years I had been shut out, invisible. But in that single moment, my grandson had lifted me into the light for everyone to see. The truth was no longer buried. It was alive, spoken into the world, and no amount of Denise's scheming could undo it. And though I wasn't there to see her face crumble, I could picture it perfectly. The mighty queen, stripped of her crown in front of the very kingdom she tried to control. That was the moment everything changed. The news of Ethan's speech spread through Richmond faster than wildfire on a dry summer's day. By the next morning, my phone rang nonstop. Old friends, distant relatives, even neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years called to tell me how proud I should be. Some were crying, others were laughing, but all of them repeated the same words. "He said your name, Margaret. He honored you." For me, it was as if years of silence had been broken in a single breath. My grandson's voice had restored me, not in private, not behind closed doors, but in front of everyone who mattered. But for Denise, the aftermath was very different. Later, I learned from Helen what had unfolded backstage. As soon as Ethan stepped off the stage, Denise had pulled him by the arm, her face twisted with fury. She hissed through clenched teeth, demanding to know why he would embarrass her like that. Then, God bless him, stood tall. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He shook off her grip and said, "You lied to me, Mom. Grandma didn't abandon me. You hid her. You hid everything." Those words, I imagine, must have cut her deeper than any knife. For years she had controlled the story, weaving lies to make me seem like the outsider, the intruder. And in a matter of seconds, Ethan had torn the veil away. I wasn't there, but I could see it all in my mind. Denise, cornered, her polished mask cracking, her tongue sharp but powerless against the truth. And Ethan, my Daniel's son, standing firm in the dignity of honesty. Not long after, I received the call I had waited for, not from Denise but from Ethan himself. His voice trembled with emotion, deeper than I remembered, yet still carrying the warmth of the boy who once clung to my hand. "Grandma," he said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I know now. I know everything." Tears blurred my vision as I listened, my heart swelling with both sorrow and joy. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that he had been just a child caught in the web of someone else's pride. But all I could manage was, "I've always loved you, Ethan. Always." Nothing she did could change that. In that moment, the years of betrayal melted away. The bond Denise had tried to sever was still there, strong as ever, waiting to be claimed. And though Denise raged and fumed, she could no longer control the story. The truth was out, and the boy she had tried to shield from me was now a young man who had chosen to see with his own eyes. That was the beginning of the end, not for me but for her reign of control. The first time Ethan came to my doorstep after all those years, I could hardly believe it was real. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day where the air feels heavy with summer heat and the cicadas sing like a choir. I heard the sound of a car door shutting outside, and when I peeked through the lace curtain, there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, his cap from graduation tucked under his arm. My hands trembled as I opened the door. For a moment we both just stared, the years hanging between us like a curtain waiting to be torn down. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. "Grandma," he whispered. His voice cracked. Mine did too as I said his name, Ethan. That hug lasted longer than any I can remember. It was the kind of embrace that stitched together torn fabric, that mended something broken inside both of us. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wet just like mine. We spent the afternoon sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I had once sorted Daniel's papers and guarded the scholarship. I made us sweet tea just the way Daniel liked it, and I pulled out the scrapbook I'd been keeping for years. Every newspaper clipping, every birthday card I had written but never delivered, every little token of love I had saved, I laid them before him. Ethan's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. "You kept all this?" he asked, his voice soft with awe. "I kept you," I said. "Even when I couldn't see you, I kept you close." He reached across the table and held my hand. "She told me you didn't care. She said you didn't want to be around." I shook my head. That was never true. Not for 1 second. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of understanding, of healing, of the love that had waited in the shadows for too long. Meanwhile, Denise wasn't taking things so gracefully. I heard through neighbors and whispers in town that she was furious. She tried to explain away Ethan's public thank you, claiming I had manipulated him, that I had twisted things to make her look bad. But no one seemed to believe her. Her perfect facade had cracked wide open, and the community could see through it. And worse for her, Ethan no longer lived under her thumb. He was 18 now, a man no longer bound by her rules. He came to see me when he wanted, no permission asked, no explanations given. For the first time in years, I could feel peace settling into my bones. The storm wasn't fully over, not yet. Denise wasn't the type to surrender easily. But for once I wasn't afraid of her. The tide had turned, and it was my turn to stand in the light. Life has a way of circling back, of pulling truth to the surface no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Denise thought she could erase me, that by locking me out of Ethan's life she would erase my love, my presence, even my name. But love is stubborn. It leaves marks that no lie can wash away. Now when Ethan comes by, we sit on the porch swing Daniel once built, the wood creaking under us as we talk about school, his dreams, his father. Sometimes we sit in silence, just watching the fireflies spark across the yard, and I think to myself, this is what she tried to steal from me. This is what she could never kill. Denise still keeps her distance, though every now and then I'll catch her glaring from across the church parking lot or hear of her bitter words through the grapevine. But her power is gone. She no longer controls the story. Ethan knows the truth, and that is enough. I've learned something in all of this. Betrayal cuts deep, especially when it comes from family. Can leave scars that ache for years. But if you wait, if you hold steady, if you keep your love alive even in secret, truth will have its day. Lies may flourish for a season, but they cannot survive forever. So I choose peace. I choose dignity. And I choose to let my grandson know that no matter what happened, no matter how many years we lost, he has always had a grandmother who loved him fiercely, quietly, and without end. This is my story, one of pain, patience, and a reckoning that came not with anger but with truth. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and please share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters, and sometimes telling it is the first step toward healing.